He gave me an ultimatum. I'd already proven he forged my signature. In 6 hours, he'd stand at his mother's Christmas table and order me to apologize or leave in front of everyone he loved. He had no idea how much I already knew, or what I was already about to do with it. My name is Claire Bennett. I was 34, married 7 years. Working as a billing administrator at a Denver hospital system, I was the person insurance companies called when the numbers stopped adding up. I once found a missing $4 buried inside a $40,000 claim. Some marriages don't end in a fight. They end in a spreadsheet, and mine had been quietly wrong for months before I let myself add it up. My husband Dean ran a small construction company his father built 40 years ago. A good month meant new tools. A bad month meant a quiet dinner where nobody said the word invoice. Some months the business was flush. Some months it was tight. I told myself that was normal. The kind of normal you stop examining once you've decided you can live with it. What wife doesn't learn to live with uneven money? Every Christmas Eve for 6 years, we drove 8 hours north to his parents' lake house in Traverse City, Michigan, a dining room with a chandelier nobody dusted and a gun cabinet nobody locked. My son Milo was 4. He loved trains and hated sitting still, and every visit I spent half the night pulling him away from that cabinet. One small hand always reaching for the glass. My mother-in-law Patricia decided I wasn't good enough for her son before I'd finished introducing myself. She corrected the way I carved the turkey. She corrected the way I held my own child. She once told a room full of relatives that she'd never understand women who let strangers raise their kids while they chased a paycheck. And she said it while looking directly at me, smiling the entire time. And every single time, Dean looked at his plate and said nothing. Not once in 6 years did he take his eyes off that plate to defend me. Not once did he say, "That's my wife, don't talk about her that way." This year was supposed to be different. I told myself that every December for 6 years. The same quiet promise I never kept. This year, I was wrong, in a way none of us saw coming, because 3 weeks before that dinner, on an ordinary Tuesday night while Dean coached Milo's swim class, I opened a drawer that wasn't mine to open, and I found something. That drawer didn't just have papers in it. It had 6 weeks of my life that nobody in that family knew about. It started small, the way these things always do. $40 missing. Then $200, small amounts gone from our joint checking account that Dean always explained away. A supplier paid twice, a client check that bounced, numbers he promised would balance out next month. They never did. I run budgets for a living. Every morning at that hospital, I reconcile numbers that don't want to be reconciled. And I know what a real accounting mistake looks like. And I know what a rehearsed story sounds like when someone's practiced it in the shower before saying it out loud to your face. Have you ever caught yourself believing an explanation only because you wanted to? The missing checking account money wasn't the real problem. The real problem was in a drawer in our own garage, in a folder Dean thought I'd never open because I never went near his side of the workbench. That Tuesday, I went near it anyway, looking for a warranty card for the water heater. Inside the folder was a home equity line of credit application for $38,000. Taken against our house, dated 4 months earlier. My name was on it as co-borrower, right beside a signature that was supposed to be mine. I never signed that page. I know my own signature, the way it drags on the C, the way it never loops, and the one on that document leaned the wrong direction entirely, a stranger's handwriting wearing my name. Underneath it were bank statements from an account I didn't know existed, mailed to a P.O. box 20 minutes from our house, statements showing thousands of dollars moving out in transfers to an online sportsbook week after week for over a year, sometimes twice in a single weekend. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't confront him for 6 more weeks. I kept smiling at dinner. I kept packing his lunches, kept signing Milo's permission slips at the kitchen table like a woman with nothing to hide. Some people watching this will say that makes me a coward, that a real wife would have thrown the folder on the table and demanded answers. I think it made me the only adult left in that marriage still thinking clearly. What would you have done? Exploded that same night, or built the case first? Because here's what 6 years in that family had taught me, and what you learn too. Once a family like that gets its hooks in you, the person who reacts first loses. Patricia had trained everyone in that house to flinch first and think later, and I watched it happen to every daughter-in-law who came before me. I stopped flinching. Instead, I photographed every page. I opened an email account Dean didn't know existed. I told him nothing and started a folder labeled, of all things, holiday recipes, because I knew he'd never look there. The safest place to hide the truth is somewhere your husband thinks is boring. I called a lawyer named Renata Cruz on my lunch break, sitting in my car in a hospital parking garage, fluorescent light flickering overhead. My hands shaking so hard I had to read the intake form twice before I could fill it in. I told her everything, start to finish, and she told me one thing back I never forgot. A forged signature isn't a marriage problem, she said. It's a federal one. It got worse before I even had time to sit with that sentence, because the sportsbook transfers weren't the only surprise waiting in that folder. Under the bank statements was a second phone bill, a number I didn't recognize, billed to our address, active for 14 months. I sat in that garage and realized the man asleep beside me for 6 years had built an entire second set of finances I knew absolutely nothing about, and I had exactly one Christmas Eve left before I had to sit across from his family and pretend none of it existed. How do you pass the mashed potatoes to a man you're about to leave? That was the question I carried into that lake house on December 24th, not whether I'd leave. I'd already decided that in the parking garage weeks earlier, but whether Dean would give me an opening to do it on my own terms, in front of the one audience that had never once believed a word I said. By the time Patricia passed the green beans, I already had the lawyer's number saved in my phone under a fake name. Dinner went the way it always did. Patricia's compliments arrived with knives folded inside them. Grant refilled his beer and watched football on his phone under the table. Sable murmured something to her teenage daughter that made the girl laugh behind her hand. Milo fell asleep on the couch in the next room, his toy train still gripped in one fist. I watched him through the doorway and felt something in me go completely still. Patricia waited until every plate was full. She always did. She liked an audience, and she liked it best when Grant and Sable were both watching to see how I'd react. "Claire," she said, smiling the smile that never once touched her eyes, "I keep telling Dean, a boy needs his mother home, not at some hospital all day." Grant nodded along like she'd said something wise. Sable made a small sympathetic sound into her wine glass. The table went quiet the way tables go quiet when everyone already knows what's coming next. I looked at Dean first. I always looked at Dean first, some old habit of hoping, just once, he'd speak up before I had to. He kept his eyes on his plate, the same place they'd been for 6 years. "I work because I need to," I said, keeping my voice level, "and because I'm good at it." Patricia laughed the small, sympathetic laugh built to sound like sympathy while doing the opposite. Grant smirked into his beer. And something in me, some final worn-down thread that had been fraying since that Tuesday night, finally snapped. I set my fork down. "Ask Dean," I said, "why there's a $38,000 loan on our house with my forged signature on it." The room didn't just go quiet. It went still in a way I had never once heard a room go still. Dean's fork hit the table. "Claire, ask him," I said, louder now, steadier than I felt, "why a sportsbook has taken more money from our family this year than his own company made." Dean stood so fast his chair tipped backward and hit the floor. His father, Walt, didn't move from the head of the table, didn't say a word, just watched the way he always watched, like the whole house was a job site he was quietly inspecting. And in front of his mother, his father, his brother, and his brother's wife, Dean said the words he genuinely believed would end it. "Apologize to my mother right now, or don't bother getting in the car tomorrow." Every eye in that room turned to me, waiting for the tears they'd watched me swallow 100 times before. I looked past all of them, into the living room at my son asleep with a plastic train still tucked under his arm, completely unaware his whole world was about to change. And the anger I'd been carrying for 6 weeks just left me, all at once, like a held breath finally released. What replaced it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. "Okay," I said. "You already know what that word cost me, if you've ever said it and meant something else entirely." Dean stayed at the lake house that night. He needed his mother, he said, to tell him he'd done the right thing. I drove home alone with Milo asleep in his car seat. Somewhere on that dark highway, I stopped shaking. What replaced the shaking was a plan I'd already finished building weeks before that table ever went quiet. 2 plane tickets to San Jose, Costa Rica, a city Dean had never once mentioned in 7 years of marriage. With 0 contacts, 0 family, 0 way to follow us without a passport he kept in a drawer, I now knew the combination to. Before we boarded, I sent one email, not to Dean, but to Renata. Attached to it was everything: the forged HELOC, the sportsbook statements, the second phone bill, and a fully drafted divorce petition citing financial fraud. This was never really a story about one marriage. It's a story about every family that mistakes silence for peace, and every woman who's been told that keeping the family together matters more than telling the truth she's been sitting on. Peace built on silence isn't peace. It's a debt collecting interest. 2 weeks later, from a rented kitchen table with a view I still couldn't quite believe was mine, Renata called with something I hadn't expected. The forensic accountant reviewing the HELOC fraud had found a pattern going back 3 years, small transfers moving out of Walt's own retirement account into Dean's business every single time a project ran over budget. Walt hadn't just known about Dean's trouble. Walt had been quietly funding it for years, draining his and Patricia's retirement without telling her a single dollar was gone, wiring it in amounts small enough that no statement ever raised a flag on its own. The man with the immaculate, untouchable gun cabinet, the patriarch who let his wife pick me apart at every dinner for 6 straight years, had been hiding a secret of his own the entire time, right under that same chandelier. Patricia found out at 62 years old that she'd spent 30 years married to a man keeping the exact same kind of secret her son had just kept from me, the same silence, the same folder somewhere she'd never thought to open. I felt something when I heard that. Not sympathy. Recognition. 8 months later, a judge in Traverse City looked at a forged signature and a sportsbook statement and finished what that Christmas Eve dinner started. The HELOC was voided in full. The bank opened its own fraud review into the forged signature, and Dean is still working through what his attorney calls a complicated process, which is a polite way of saying federal cases don't move fast. And they don't move quietly either. I was awarded full custody of Milo, and the judge's written order used a word I still think about: deliberate. Dean's visits are supervised, for now, pending the outcome of that review. Some people watching this will say I should have confronted him that first week instead of quietly building a case for 6. I've thought about that more than once, and I'd still make the same choice again. Would you rather be right for one loud night at that table, or right in a courtroom 8 months later, with every document already in your name? I never spoke to Patricia again after the email I sent her from an airport gate, no anger in it, just the HELOC documents and one line: "You asked why Dean looked miserable." Now you both know. I heard, through a cousin who still checks in on holidays, that she and Walt separated within the year. 30 years of marriage, and it turned out neither of them had ever told the other the whole truth. Milo started at a small school built around a courtyard in San Jose. Within 2 months, he was saying gracias more naturally than he said his own father's last name. I worked odd hours over video calls for a while, and then I didn't have to anymore because a hospital system there hired me outright, no explanations needed. There's a kind of quiet I found in that new life that I didn't even know I'd been missing. Not the tense, holding your breath quiet of Patricia's dining room, but an easy one. Milo asleep down the hall. Nobody waiting for me to say the wrong thing so they could pounce on it. I think about that Christmas table sometimes. The chandelier nobody dusted. The gun cabinet nobody locked. The silence I mistook for peace, year after year, for 6 of them. He thought he gave me an ultimatum. He actually gave me permission to stop performing a version of myself that was never once protected in return. If your own family ever hands you that same choice, apologize for a truth they don't want to hear, or leave, I hope you already know which suitcase you'd pack first and how fast you'd pack it. Because when silence finally breaks in a family like that one, it doesn't whisper on the way out. Some silences don't whisper. They ring every phone in the family. If you're still thinking about that chandelier nobody dusted, or a table of your own, sit with it for a second. You don't have to answer out loud. If this story felt like it was speaking straight to you, tap like so it reaches the next woman sitting at a table just like that one. That's exactly why when Family Revenge Strikes exists, for the women watching who felt that same table go quiet and known exactly what it meant. Subscribe if you want the next story waiting for you before it happens to someone you love.